Washington landed a huge commitment from four-star athlete Dylan Robinson.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen today, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. Sports stuff sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Lars, we got a great show coming for the everydayers on a Thursday afternoon, a little bit early in lieu of our Friday show. We're going to talk about who we think will lead Washington in all major offensive categories this fall, some of the strongest position groups on the roster, but that's coming after the commitment of four-star wide receiver, cornerback, safety, plays all over the field, does whatever, athlete Dylan Robinson from Bonita High School in California. And Lars, I think Zadrius Rainey-Sale is still the crown jewel of this class for many different reasons, those we discussed on a previous show. But I think Dylan Robinson has my favorite tape in this class by a landslide.
You forgot one moniker in that introduction. Young King is what he will be at Washington, as John Richardson says, right? He's a young king. He's coming in as a cornerback. And I think that's why I remember we had this discussion, a month or two ago on the show, where it's, again, there's no wrong answer in this discussion, where does he play receiver? Does he play cornerback? I know 247 says they like him at safety. I haven't seen a ton of safety tape from what we've seen. So maybe his size and frame grows into a safety, which I can certainly see that. But man, a press corner, 6'3", 190 coming in, built top. And here's the thing that we're not talking about. Forget all this. Forget playing on both sides. The top 10, one of the top 10 athletes consensus between the composite and 247's ranking separately in the country. That right there. And I believe Jonathan Epperson is close to that. I believe Jonathan Epperson is 12.
Yeah, Jonathan Epperson is number 12.
So again, you're talking about two defensive guys in the top 15 in the country coming in year one for Jedd Fisch. Let's go look back at what Jedd did at Arizona with Tacario Davis. Prysock was a 4-star as well, but that was in year two. This is why it was so important to get this talent in year one. And I know it's unofficially year one because they're not coming in this fall, but for that first class to go in 25, and this is why Jedd Fisch, in a way, the 24 season is giving Jedd a running start to what he's building in 25 and beyond. And this is why the 25 class is so important. You need to stack blue chippers on top of blue chippers on top of blue chippers. And you know what? If you're right and Dylan Robinson happens to be a sophomore wide receiver, I ain't going to complain, because that means the coaches gave him a shot at cornerback. And who knows, given the depth at cornerback, we're talking about Curly Reed, Lure Bryant, there's a number of guys, Caleb Preston, that are in that mix. Maybe they emerge more, and then, you know what, we'll get you some more playing time on offense until we can get you some meaningful snaps on defense. That's a perfect world to be in, because you already have good talent you now coached up for 2 years, plus this incoming class. And I think that, to me, is what's going to elevate Jedd's track record at Washington, or expedite it, not elevate it, expedite it next season, knowing that they're probably going to be mid-tier 8-4, 9-3 this season, but getting back into being a perennial 10-win program like they were under Chris Peterson. This is how you do that early on. And as we've said on the show, it took Chris Peterson a while to get those consistently 4-star athletes in the program. Jedd's doing it in year one. We got to give credit where credit is due in that regard.
I couldn't agree with you more. Hats off to him for doing that. And he becomes the second highest rated member of this class with 247 Sports' rankings. And this is somebody who you and I have talked about on this show for weeks, months on end at this point, because he's just that talented of a prospect. And we've talked about him so much on the field. I think we need to just continue to dive in to what he can be off, what kind of, impact he makes by, as you said, if he does end up playing wide receiver, that's not a bad thing. If he ends up at safety, that's not a bad thing. If he ends up sticking a corner, that's not a bad thing, because no matter where it is, it's about getting this level of talent into the program. And as you said, continuing to build it, continuing to stack it. And this is somebody who I fully expect him to burn his red shirt and play a whole lot next season at whatever position it is, truly. And I just couldn't be more excited about a guy like this, because this is what you were hoping for when you looked at that May 31st visit weekend. And of the guys who went into it uncommitted, Washington only was able to pull out 3 right now. There's still a couple more guys that aren't committed. We'll see what happens with Andrew Marsh. Madden Farimo is probably going elsewhere. But outside of that, it wasn't necessarily what you were hoping that it would be. And getting Dylan Robinson, who was one of the big time visitors from that weekend, to commit is huge. That's awesome. That's really important. And then it's just about building that momentum, as you said, for the 26th class, for the 27th class, and just continuing to say, okay, yeah, this is one of those guys where, we've talked about Tacario McMillan a lot and what he was able to do down at Arizona early on in his career and how that really can become a selling point for the development that this staff had down there. And obviously it's a different position here, but it's that same thing where if John Richardson can point to him and just say, yeah, this is a guy who came in, succeeded as a freshman, developed him, he ends up becoming a high round NFL draft pick in 3, 4, 5 years from now. Yeah, that's what this program can do. That's what it's all about. I think that he's the perfect guy to just kind of prop up in that light of somebody who can be developed at a very, very high level by the staff.
I agree. A great callback to that weekend because I remember when I was writing my story, I was like, wow, 3 for 15 is not a good batting average. But I think at the same point, that's why they took those big swings that weekend, knowing also the thing that you said there with Andrew Marsh, this doesn't preclude that take. They could still very much take Andrew Marsh. And I think the fact that publicly committing as a cornerback, which is basically what he's doing here with acknowledging John Richardson and the defensive coaching staff, which again, there's no shot at Kevin Cummings. It's just more or less, hey, let me come in with John Richardson. If I happen to end up with Kevin Cummings, so be it. But that's where stacking talent works together, where Andrew Marsh can say, oh, he's coming in as a quarterback. Cool. So I can still go to Washington. It's not, oh, you're taking a guy who's going to be a receiver who might switch over to cornerback. Then if you're Andrew Marsh, okay, maybe now you got Chris Lawson. Now you got Dylan Robinson. You got a couple other receivers, Deji Josie, the roebuck in the class. Maybe my spot would be limited. But again, that being said, I think Andrew Marsh should play wherever he's going. So I don't think the numbers are going to matter that much. But just in the overall grand scheme of things, also seeing another 4-star from that weekend commit after all this time while having a Notre Dame offer, and you can say what you want about UCLA. I know Deshaun Frost is doing a good job on the recruiting trail, building that program back up from what Chip Kelly left it at, and we'll leave it there. But still getting the signature wins allows other recruits maybe, because I was on another show earlier today, and one thing I was asked was, if Washington starts the season 5-0, is that realistic? And I'm like, I'm not sure about 5-0, maybe 4-1. But as we get into the month of October, November, I know, again, we don't bank on flips, but some of those guys could circle back around, and having a Dylan Robinson type where you are already on campus with him and was around those recruits, you can say, hey, guys, look, I bought it. Now they're winning. The staff still wants you.
Right.
We're not going to say any names or anything like that, but there's certain guys that were on that visit where, let's say, the school they commit to doesn't end up panning out the same way they think, and vice versa. For Washington, they do. This is why getting those guys on campus back then, even though they didn't get their initial commitment, it was so important because it lays the foundation for that relationship. And similar with Robinson, as you mentioned, having these guys in the 25 class, knowing they probably know some guys in 26 and 27, and just naturally California kids, when they see another guy go to Washington, it's, oh, wow, cool. Washington's still recruiting the state of California at a high level. Maybe I want to go play with Dylan Robinson. Maybe we played on the 7-on-7 team together. That's a lot of what you're seeing in the modern day of college football is guys that like rejoining each other in college. And that's not to say that you're going to take an entire team to college. But all those relationships matter. And so getting guys like this in the boat, especially before the season, is a major statement for Jedd Fisch.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of those guys where, when we look back on this class, whether it be next year or 2 years from now, if he's somebody who is just having a high level of success, I don't mean this in comparison in terms of play style because they're very different, but in terms of impact you can have on a program, it could be a lot like what Trent McDuffie did, in my opinion, where he came in, just forced his way out of the field right away because he's that talented, he's that good, and he just changes the program at a very high level. And yeah, you already had a really, really nice secondary to begin with, but this is a dude who just takes it over the top. And that's exactly what I feel like Dylan Robinson can do. And Lars, that being said, we're going to switch gears here a little bit because we're going to hit some of the strongest position groups of 2024. And some of our names and positions might not be who the Everydayers think they are. right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and sports aren't sporting like I want them to. With FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And I've said it once, I'm going to say it again. I know I love Mason Miller in the American League for Rookie of the Year, but I'm going to stick with my guy, Ceddanne Rafaela there. I like his odds over on FanDuel. And that's a guy who, he's second on the team in RBIs, got a fantastic glove. He deserves to win a Gold Glove in multiple positions. That's somebody who I would certainly, hammer those odds on FanDuel for Rookie of the Year right now. Lars, what do you think Washington's strongest position group in 2024 will be?
Do you want to start chalk or do you want to go off the reservation? Because we could go both ways. And I think maybe we save the chalk for a little bit later.
No, let's start chalk. Let's start there.
So we'll start chalk. Give me Carson Bruener, Alfonso Chupachala. I don't think you could start and build a defense. Yeah, linebackers. Again, call back to what I was saying on another show earlier. The more I start to think about it, where we talk about the fresh faces in the secondary, where you have Cam Fab and Prysock coming in, and McCullis, we'll give him some credit because he's got a couple of interceptions to his credit. So 3 guys in the Elijah Jackson and Thaddeus Dixon on the outside. So guys with experience, but not necessarily entrenched, 12 multi-season starters in that regard. Alfonso Chupachala is coming back as a starter. Carson Bruener, had it not been for Eddie last season, would have been a starter. And I think he's going to show this season why. And importantly enough, having first-year defense coordinator Steve Belichick and having Carson Bruener as the defensive play caller, I think it's a perfect match made in heaven because Carson is a football savant. He's a high football IQ player playing in the middle of the defense. He's going to be able to set up the defense well. And when you're talking about figuring out the front 4 or even the back 5, having somebody where maybe doesn't have necessarily the starting experience, but just knows what the defense should look like and how Steve Belichick wants to run things. I think for me, you cannot start anywhere else but with linebacker.
So I really like where you're going there. I know we both have one offensive and one defensive that we're going to get to. So I'm going to stick with my defensive one, and I'm going to go with the secondary here. I feel like, like you said, it might be a little bit of a chalk pick. I feel like linebacker is the number one just because of all the experience that you have there. And, like you talked about McAllister a second ago, no slight to him, but he doesn't have, the starting experience that Alfonso Chupachala does, all the experience that Brian Parham does, one of the guys in the rotation there, even Drew Fowler when you want to really get into it and how much experience he has under his belt at the college level. And obviously Carson Bruener as well. That goes without saying. But when I look at the secondary, I see a group that is just chock full of talent. And we talked about it on the show yesterday where we talked about, this morning as it's still Thursday. Time doesn't exist to me anymore. I don't know what time is. But the more I think about it, the more I look at it, I just think that this could end up being one of the 10 best secondaries in the country. I firmly believe that. Where I look at Ephesians Prysock, and that's a dude who can be an all-world corner. You look on the other side, Elijah Jackson, Thaddeus Dixon have, they've had success in spurts. I love, obviously we know what Elijah could do when he's, at his full potential with all his athleticism. I love that. I was really high on him last year. I still am. I think that just the coaching that he's received from last year to this year is awesome. And this defense really allows him to utilize his strengths a lot better than Chuck Morrell's and William Inches did. And I don't feel that's a slight on them, but it's something that, we talked about with him where he said, yeah, I feel that I can play a lot more aggressive because I know I have help over the top. I know I can do things a little bit differently with my technique. And I really love hearing that. And then, Jordan Shaw on the nickel arguably had the best spring out of any of the defensive backs, in my opinion. He was really, really good. And that's, without mentioning the guys that we talked about on our last show with Cam Broussard, the Sacramento State transfer, and Justin Harrington, the Oklahoma transfer, where those two guys, you add them to this rotation. And, I didn't even mention Tristan Dunn, who has the ability to take a leap forward this year. And you'd mentioned him a little bit earlier, Caleb Presley, Curly Reed, Leroy Bryant, those 3 guys as well. Elias Johnson, I don't think he's going to make that much of an impact this year. I have a feeling he's going to be one of those guys that red shirts, but I love what his potential is. I love what his ceiling is. All of a sudden you're looking at a group that is really, really talented, but also super deep. And if these guys can live up to their potential, I truly believe that it can be an elite secondary.
I'm with you. I think that's kind of the key. All the pieces are there. It's just how is it going to come together? Because there's so many guys that you can put. I mean, how much time do we talk about the four freshman safeties coming in where they might burn their record, and then we look at the transfer board and think, oh, you brought a bunch of veterans in, so I think they're probably going to play a little bit more than the freshmen, but the freshmen will certainly play. So now, as we were going through this, and I didn't really even think about this, and I don't know how you're going to feel about this, because there's two position groups that I want to go with on offense, so I'm going to pick one. And I don't necessarily know how convicted I am in it, but I'm going to say it anyways. I am going to say the quarterbacks, and here's why. Okay. Because when I look at the other, and this be clear, the other one was going to be receivers, and which obviously leaves one for you. But when you look at the receivers, they don't go without the quarterback. And I think having a fifth-year senior in Will Rogers, such a veteran coming from the SEC, is going to be able to help set up the offensive line, is going to be able to know which throws to make to certain receivers because he has that veteran presence, and knowing where Jeremiah Hunter is going to want the ball, knowing how Denzel Boston can just get open pretty much seamlessly from anywhere on the field. And then also getting the ball out quickly to Giles Jackson, the running backs and the swing route, all that sort of stuff. There is not a more veteran guy on the offense than Will Rogers. So when I look at the strongest, I also think about who's behind him. Shaker Kendall coming in from Northern Colorado will say kind of parlay that more so into Damon Williams, where Will Rogers, great pocket passer, without question. Probably a future quarterback coach, no doubt about it. Kind of a similar role to Jake Browning, where maybe he won't have the greatest NFL career, but because he knows football so well and knows three different offenses, he's going to find a spot at the next level somehow, some way. But Damon Williams is certainly a much better runner. And I think in that regard, there's so many things you could do at the quarterback position that puts it over the top for me, because I do like the receivers, Denzel, Jeremiah, Giles, but again, Giles didn't play a ton last season. He was hurt. Denzel got buried because of the three horsemen in front of him. Jeremiah Hunter didn't have a quarterback at Cal. There's not a ton that I can, and then you talk about Audric Harris, Rashid Williams, some of the other guys. Great talent. There's no denying. If we're saying strongest position group potential would be wide receiver. Strongest position group going into the season, I would give the edge to the quarterbacks.
So while you were talking that whole time, I was making up my mind. Do I go with running backs or do I go with receivers? And what you just said, you made my decision for me. I'm going with the running backs here because I love the receivers. We are as high on this receiving core as anybody in the Washington media. We know this. We've beat that drum. We're going to continue to beat that drum over the next weeks, months, years, whatever. That's something that will not end on this show. But I really like what you said, where we watched Denzel be the best player on the field throughout spring camp. We still haven't seen it at the fall camp level, or excuse me, not fall camp, at just during the season. We haven't seen him be that dominant. If he is, awesome. That's great. I love that. But I want to talk about the running backs here mainly because of their experience. Where we talk about Giles, when you look at the receivers, Giles was still a role player for the majority of his career at Washington. Jeremiah, that's the one guy where you say, okay, yeah, that dude's experienced and established, and he has all that. But when I look at the running backs, I see a duo, and I'm shocked people still forget about this. I see a duo of really, really experienced guys in Jonah Coleman and Cameron Davis. And I've got some bold takes on Cam Davis that we get to in the next segment. But I think that combination of running backs is top 3, top 4 in the Big Ten. Where, you think about what Ohio State's got going on, what Oregon's got going on, Michigan. Those are really good groups. And I think Washington, outside of Ohio State, where that's elite, that's unbelievable what they got going on. It's not on that level. But I think in that tier 2, that the combination of Jonah Coleman and Cameron Davis, especially if Cam is healthy, is right there. And then we talked about him on the show yesterday. If Jordan Washington all of a sudden comes in and is able to do a couple of nice things with, whenever they want to get the ball in his hands. I know one of the things I said was that there's going to be some just design plays to get the ball in his hands. I firmly believe that. And that kind of played into my reasoning here. But then I look at Adam Muhammad. We saw him throughout the spring just be a dude. Just somebody who that's going to start this fall. How much of it is going to happen this fall? I don't know. But I think that's one guy. And, relying on 2 freshmen is tough. But with the 2 experienced upperclassmen in front of them, it can create a nice mix if Scotty Graham, who I really believe in and I really trust to be one of the better running backs coaches in not just the Big Ten, but in the country. I truly believe in him to get these guys right and to put them in the best position to succeed. And with this offense, with what it can be, with what we saw it can be at Arizona, as long as you figure out the offensive line, that this can be a truly elite group of running backs.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And also worth mentioning Daniel Ngata and Sam Adams.
Absolutely,
third, fourth, so many Sam Adams at this point. But again, both those for different reasons. Sam Adams battling some injuries, hasn't proven that he can stay healthy for a full season. But again, if he's able to find even just even if he's able to get 40 carries this year, 30, 40, 50 carries, just make some type of impact. That's really all you're asking for. Because if you're on scholarship, all you got to do is make an impact and carve out some type of a role. We saw Jacob Lane do that as a young player last year. Just carve out a third down role, carve out something, carve out a check down role, swing route for Sam Adams. He's got the size to do it. And in the same way, Daniel Ngata on the other side, where you can swing both those guys out. But that's why you also bring in a pair of freshmen to push those guys and say, you know what, just because we have these veteran guys, if they don't work out, we want to have that talent coming in because we love playing freshmen. So it's a great position to be in overall.
I couldn't agree with you more. And Lars, with that being said, let's get into some bold takes on the offensive side here. All right. Passing yards is self-explanatory. We're not going to be talking about passing yards here. So we've got 4 categories that we're going to jump into, and we're going to try to figure out who, and maybe it'll get a little bold here. Got rushing yards, receiving yards, rushing touchdowns, and receiving touchdowns. Maybe if we'll have time we'll get to catches as well. So let's start with the running backs. Let's start with who do you think will have the most rushing yards on this team?
I think yards is probably going to be Jonah Coleman. I don't think there's going to, especially as the A1 back, and that's no slight to Davis or anybody else like that. But I just think that, with what he did at Arizona, averaging what you said, almost 7-8 yards per attempt. It was
7.5 yards per touch when you factored in the receiving yards.
Per touch. Okay. So, but either way, so again, a perfect combination there because we're talking about per touch, not just naturally carries or anything like that. But I do think he will be the leading rusher when all is said and done. But I don't think that Cam Davis is, to your point, I think the thing for me is going to be if Cam can prove in the month of September that he's able to shake off that rust quickly. If he's able to get through the month of September, get a few touchdowns into his bag, and let's say get 350 or more yards in the first 4 games of the season, right? Because that's not 100 yards per game. It's probably 50, 60 yards a game. If Jonah's getting, 80, 90, 110, which is probably a good thing if you think about how the offense can set up. It's a perfect battering ram. And in that regard, I would still give the slight edge to Jonah Coleman.
So I agree with you there. I think that just the way this offense has been set up with the fact that Cam missed most of spring practice just because he's still working his way back from the injury. It didn't look like he was cleared for contact for the good majority of it. And that's okay. And you're right. Like once we get in the fall camp here, it looks like he will be cleared for contact. Everything will be okay on that front. So if he's able to get it going early on, that's nice. I just think that we still have seen more from Jonah Coleman in terms of pure rushing, where he had more touches than Cam did in 2022 last season. So I agree with you where I'd give him the edge with rushing yards, but I think Cam Davis has got more rushing touchdowns. We saw just how awesome he was in the goal line in 2022. And Jonah, as you said, it can be an absolute battering ram down there. And I love that. I think that's a lot of fun. Just, with how compact he is, but just still so powerful and just the way he's able to get downhill. That's great. I think that's very useful. But Cam, you can just line him up and just he's going to get in. We saw it time and time again 2 seasons ago. So I feel like that's the safer bet there, even though I feel like it's hard for me, man, because I still want to see how the touches work out come September, which is really going to be where it's going to be most telling.
Yeah, exactly. And because again, if Cam isn't able to go in the first couple of weeks and Jordan Washington or Adam Muhammad get going, does that set Cam back? But also plays into your point of, I think if Cam is able to carve out a role where he has 10 touchdowns again, and he only has, let's say, 150 carries, maybe like 500 yards, but he's got multiple digit touchdowns, and Jonah Coleman's got 1,100 yards and 9 or 10 touchdowns. I think that's the perfect recipe right there. You're not going to lean on one or the other. You're not going to lean on one or the other. And to your point about the depth at the position, you're certainly going to use as many guys as you want to keep everybody healthy and fresh. And I think that's why each guy will kind of have their own little carved out role.
No, I certainly like your thought process there. All right, Lars, I'm gonna hand it over to you here. Let's start with receiving yards. Are you going with our favorite guy here, or are you gonna go off the reservation a little bit?
No, this is the safest bet possible. This is the minus 500 million odds on FanDuel right now. It's not, but it might as well be because Denzel Boston, for all intents and purposes, barring unforeseen things that pop up, will lead the team in receiving yards for sure this season. Just when you look at Jeremiah Hunter's got the size, I think similar kind of with the Cam Davis decision. One might have more touchdowns, but without question, Denzel is going to be the A1 target, and the yards are going to reflect that. And I think he's put in enough work as a run blocker the past couple of seasons where he will be able to stay on the field for multiple ways. He won't have to be subbed out or be in packages like that. He is now that A1 receiver, and I think this season is going to show that in every single category.
Yep, that's the only way to go here. And just the more I look at it, the more excited I get about watching Denzel Boston this fall, because we saw him win at all three levels of the field. We saw his size, his speed, that just amazing combination when combined with just elite athleticism that goes so far beyond just straight line speed. And I know we're hyping him up a lot, but that's just what we've seen for so long now, because it goes beyond just spring camp. We saw it in fall last year. We saw it in spring last year as well, where he looked really good, but it just wasn't on the same level of Rome Odunze, where I remember you and I, before this podcast existed, we were talking about how we felt truly sorry for whatever defensive back had to line up across from Rome last spring, because that they were just going to get torched. That was, and Denzel's not on that level yet, but what we saw from him this spring was the closest comparison that we can get to that. And I just think that he's somebody that Jedd is going to find a way to just feed him the football at any portion of the field, because this is a guy who you can just throw screens to. You can run him on a quick slant, whatever it is. He's got the size, the length. I know I just said all those things, but to just make a play at any point on the field. And he's somebody who, if I were Will Rogers or DeMont Williams, really, that I would trust him with my life.
Oh, yeah, no, it's the same bet. If you see, that's why they had him at punt returner in the spring as well. I mean, he's got the vision, right. And I think that's what makes him such an effective route runner, which he, again, has not been able to show, which is why when everyone says, oh, hey, here's a newcomer of the year, it's like, yeah, in technicality, yeah, much like Jelly Roll was the new artist of the year after, 5 or 7 years playing country music. It's like, yeah, you're finally people recognize the talent, but in fairness to those people, Denzel just hasn't been able to show it. But again, even back in 22, when he was the game at Oregon, where he, as a key run blocker on that first offensive drive,
right?
As a run, now again, no receptions to show for that game, but again, this is why we've been so high on Denzel, because even the former coaching staff was high on him. But again, no sane person, and that includes Shamar Shepard, is going to put Denzel Boston, as good as he was, ahead of any of those 3 or 4 guys.
Absolutely. Lars, where are you going for receiving touchdowns here?
So there's a couple of ways we can go with this, and I'm actually going to go, you know what? We're bold on the show. I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm going to do this anyways. If it's not the obvious pick, I wouldn't be surprised if Quentin Moore has significant, maybe potentially double-digit touchdowns this season. And this is going off the reservation. But the more I think about it, there is legitimacy to it, because what do we see so much in the spring? Now, again, it is the spring, a different offensive line, not a ton, 30% in, whatever you want to call it. Where was the one impact that he made the most? Red zone.
On those little drag routes. Yeah.
Well, that too, but also red zone touch. So those two things, and for that reason, he won't be the big. He'll probably be honestly 5th or 6th receiver in terms of catches and yards. But I would not be surprised if he, again, I'm a caveat of saying that he will be the top. And I'm not expecting him to be the top, but I would not be surprised if at the end of the year he's right behind Denzel and Jeremiah, or in between those two at the end of the day with multiple digit touchdowns because of that red zone presence.
So I really like where you're going there. I really wanted to go Jeremiah Hunter here, because as much as I love everything that Denzel is able to do, I just love Jeremiah's body control. I've never seen a receiver that has just that level of body control, just like the way he's able to make midair adjustments and everything like that. It's so impressive to watch him. But, I think I'm going to stick with Denzel Boston here, where, if we don't have time to get into catches, I probably have him leading the team in catches too, where this is just the level of player that he can turn into. And I really just believe that it's going to happen for him this season, where I look around the conference. I look at a lot of teams that Washington's going to play. And when I look at opposing secondaries, the most scared I am of any one matchup for him, and obviously we'll have to see what happens when they get there, is a matchup with Will Johnson and Michigan on October 5th. But outside of that, I really don't believe, because of his length and because of his size, that there's any cornerback in the Big Ten that can guard him. Because we even saw that with Ephesians Prysock. When Ephesians Prysock tried to guard him in the spring, and he would still just go up over him and boss him. And it's just, whoa, wait, hold on here. These guys are both like 6'4". What's going on here? Why does he look like he's still a foot taller than him? It was just amazing to watch. And I really do believe that he's somebody that he can just go up full extension and pull in touchdowns on 5, 6, 7 fade routes, along with everything else that might go on for him this season.
Yeah, and again, and to be clear, I would pick that. I want to mix it up a little bit, because again, you're absolutely right. Denzel will be, probably the guy that has the most targets, most catches, most touchdowns at the end of the season. But it's not just Denzel. I think that's why I wanted to highlight Quentin more, because when we're talking about Jeremiah and Denzel, you've got two outside guys. We saw plenty of over the middle over during the spring, and so I think there's going to be enough. Maybe not 10, it might be a bold, but again, this show's bold, so why not? But between 5 and 10 touchdowns for Quentin Moore, I would not be surprised. And honestly, if you're getting that on him, imagine what you're getting out of Khaleke Lassie.
Right. Love that. Lars, with that being said, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. Like we said at the beginning, this is going to take the place of our Friday show. So we're going to be coming to you next on Monday. And like we say at the end of every episode, this is why you got to make sure you subscribe and click that little bell, because when we drop surprise episodes like this, special episodes after commits, everything like that, you got to make sure that you're the first to get on with us, right? And that's what it's all about. We have so much fun here on the show. We really do appreciate you for tuning in every single day, and make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you like the video, click the little bell. Like I said, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop a comment right down below. And if you're audio only, please leave us 5-star reviews. It does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Monday.